Wiebe, thank you so much for joining me on Payments Unpacked TV. SurePay are a long-time supporter of Payments Unpacked, both here in the UK and across Europe. But you're a new face to Payments Unpacked, you're a new face to me. So I just wonder whether perhaps you could please introduce yourself and SurePay.
Yeah, maybe most intense to start with SurePay. Back in the time, let's say we talk about 2016, there was a need to be able to know if you were paying the right person. And our founders came up with a brilliant privacy preserving ID, and that became what now is known as VoP and CoP. They were then working at Rabobank. Rabobank founded the great ID, so it was implemented in 2017 there, and then all other Dutch banks quickly took it over. About myself, I joined SurePay in January as a fraud detection strategist. I work since 1999 for and at banks, 15 years of that for the ING. And in 2010, I entered the area of fraud detection. Later also money laundering. At that time, it was a great period for the fraudsters. There was a huge peak in the Netherlands. And we had a nice team of knowledgeable people. And if you do that, some great things come out. At some time, I built a model that worked well above expectation, and later we found out it was a neural model using boosting. We just built it because it worked and not because we wanted to build something fancy. In 2015, the fraud was all but gone, and I left ING, and since then I worked for several vendors. And as said, in January, I joined SurePay.
Fantastic. So a few people would have heard of SurePay. It's good to get an update on them. And it's great to get an introduction into you and your background and the reason that you're on this podcast today. So let's dive in with a question. We're going to use VoP and CoP both as acronyms but interchangeably. But whether you're in the UK or in Europe, you'll recognise, hopefully, those acronyms. So with verification of payee now live across the Eurozone as part of the instant payments regulation, I wanted to ask you, how have the first few weeks of mandatory verification checks been performing? I guess at the heart of my question, Wiebe, is are banks and PSPs seeing smoother transactions, or are they seeing early teething issues?
Well, as you could expect, there are some teething issues. We ourselves used some years to get the, let's say, matching algorithm right. And when you look at the UK, there were also some teething issues. So it's only logical that that also is the same in Europe. Yes, for what we see, the consumers are very happy because they feel very more secure, especially when they do higher transactions and they can see that they are paying the right person. But we can also see, as we are in the system, that a lot of banks and some vendors in the area are struggling with high numbers of no matches or close matches. They will solve that for certain. It might take sometimes some longer, sometimes it will be a bit quicker. But in the end, I think it's going quite well.
So going quite well, few teething problems, but at the end of the day, consumers are enjoying a greater level of trust and confidence in the payments they make. Let's pick up on that trust and confidence and think about the fact that confirmation of payee and verification of payee here in the UK and across Europe, they're fast becoming hygiene factors when making payments. And they've made that enormous impact on building trust and confidence when people make payments. Now, we've got that additional level of trust and confidence, but we wouldn't expect the fraudster to rest on his or her laurels. And similarly, we mustn't be complacent and think that CoP and VoP nail the issues once and for all. On the back of successfully implementing CoP and VoP, what more could be done to thwart the fraudster and protect our payments?
I think you're very right. The fraudsters want their money, and it's their income, their living, so they'll find whatever ways around they can. VoP CoP do help. They help a lot. You can see it in the statistics, but they're not a silver bullet. Nothing is. So in the Netherlands, we already have added some indicators, also on the PE, that help the bank to get a more holistic view of the transaction. You can compare it this way: if a customer does a transaction within the bank, then the bank knows everything about both the payer and the payee. And it can quite easily check that the transaction is logical for both the payer and the payee. Fraudsters know that, so typically they will do transactions to a payee outside the bank, or even outside the country, just to assure that the bank executing the transaction has less information, lesser knowledge. So we added some indicators, again, privacy preserving. We love privacy by design. So it's just some general characteristics that the bank can feed directly into the fraud detection system. And then the fraudster has a better view of what's happening and can better evaluate the transaction. And we see some results that does help.
Really interesting, because in Payments Unpacked, I've often spoken about the need to think deeper than just CoP and VoP. And you've started to unpack there the concept of focusing on other indicators of fraud. You maybe started to mention the role of anonymized data fields. Just dig a bit deeper, Wiebe, for me in terms of the impact these extra indicators of fraud might have on false positives.
As said, the Dutch banks are now using the first set, just a small set, and we see great results already. You can think of some 20 to 50% in reduction of false positives, which is of course great for the consumers, because it's very, let's say, they call it in the industry friction, but as a person, if your transaction is blocked, that's very annoying.
It's not friction. It's, from that point of view, it's a brick wall, isn't it? My payment won't go.
Yes, and you have to contact the bank, and the bank has to assure that you are you, and etc. etc. So that takes a lot of time and frustration, because first of all, most people think they did something wrong. I just have been doing some building. That means I have to do some higher payments to companies I've never paid before. So those are typically transactions that are a higher risk. The better the information the bank has, the better it can support the customers by pinpointing the fraud and not the normal, let's say, the normal unusual transactions.
So you've taunted me or tempted me around extra indicators there. I'm going to make a guess. I think you mean things like VAT numbers, company house data, that sort of stuff. What type of indicators would make a difference in reducing false positives and being sure that the right person gets the money?
Well, I'm sure as you have a very interesting podcast, there were also people listening in that I don't want to make more knowledgeable than they are. Yes, let's take that VAT number, for instance, or the company house number. With that, you can supply let's say, the payer bank with some additional information. For instance, the industry the company is working in. And then suddenly it becomes clear that, let's say, a chocolate retailer is now paying a concrete plant. Which of course is highly unusual. Theoretically it could happen, but in practice, no. And then we also go to a next step. Confirmation of Payee, verification of Payee is first of all intended to prevent fraud, but it also helps in money laundering. The example I just gave could very well be a money launderer that wants to do the transaction because it's being it's busy obfuscating where the origin from the money is, so the money laundering. If the banks then call them, they'll confirm that they want to do a transaction. Yes, it's correct, it's no fraud, it's money laundering. This kind of information helps the bank both to detect fraud and money laundering.
Very, very interesting. Do you know, we started, my first question said, how's it going in Europe with verification of payee? I'm going to finish with my last question, thinking about a focus on the United Kingdom, because we're here today talking to you as part of SurePay. You guys invented this stuff around these verification checks. You've seen confirmation of payee being introduced in the United Kingdom and make a real difference in thwarting the fraudster. Both as your idea being deployed across the UK, but also an active participant here in the industry in the UK. So with all that background and all that experience, what do you think the UK should do next in terms of its fight against fraud?
I think the UK is working quite well in that respect. I think most important is cooperation between the banks. I talked about adding some indicators on the payee. If you look at the EFD, Enhanced Fraud Data Initiative in the UK, the principle is great, I think. It goes in the same direction as what we want to do. The only bad thing about EFD, my personal opinion, is that it is way too complex. Things have to be simple to easily implement. You of course have to think of privacy. So instead of let's say giving all the details, you can also exchange the characteristics. And if you would simplify EFD, then I think the market adoption would be better. So I think the UK should think in that direction.
So make it accessible, make it simple, make it work.
Yes.
Perfect, Wiebe. Thank you so much. We've reached the end of our time together. Thank you for joining us and thinking about how CoP and VoP are boosting trust in payments and how exploring new tools like those indicators of fraud you've mentioned are going to further help our endeavour to combat fraud, both here in the UK and right across the continent of Europe. If you want to know more about SurePay and its fraud reduction initiatives, you'll find them at surepay.eu, and of course you'll find Wiebe on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Payments Unpacked TV, either on YouTube or via payments-unpacked.com. Thanks for listening.